Welcome to a brand new show, Still Uncaptured, with me, Kgomotso Matsunyane, and
Of course, I am Ndumiso Ngcobo, mostly known as Umapoloba, even though we'll get into this, right?
we will get into it,
Yeah,
and also known as Makanda.
and other people know me as Iqadi, Ndumiso Ngcobo, and we're still uncaptured, madam.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, our conversations keep getting interrupted very
exactly.
rudely.
Yeah.
And so we promised ourselves, so it's like, so as we were so rudely interrupted the last time, we're going to continue the conversations that we are well
Yeah.
known for. Why are we well known for our conversations in Dumi? So how
I,
did this
I,
start?
I have absolutely no idea where you want to go with this particular conversation. Although I have to say, one of the changes with us being in this brand new studio, this lovely studio, is if ever people talk about in your face,
Yes.
it is this mic. I have never
Yes.
said it.
It is
It's
quite there.
close.
Hello,
Yeah.
hello.
You know how this you and I started? It was actually quite an amazing thing. So I'll ngesiZulu yazi bathini?
Bathini?
Bathi uyikha phezulu. So
Okay.
I will just start like right on the surface where I write this particular book, right? A collection of really crazy essays.
But didn't it start with is it a column?
Yes.
Or there was a website, a blog,
Yes.
or called Thought Leader.
Let me tell my story.
Okay.
I got into that blog because of the book. That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Is that because I knew I had an upcoming book, remember 2007. Some of my best friends are white. I then started this blog. All of a sudden, I'm getting interaction from people because I am just writing my crazy, smart thoughts, but
Very smart thoughts.
but a bit off center.
Completely off center.
A bit of
Counterculture.
Counterculture.
Irreverent.
Irreverent, unafraid.
Yep.
And then one day, someone is interacting and seeing Thought Leader, and he's seeing, there was actually another one called Amagama. So there was another blog called amagama.com where I was writing a Silwane Kanjila as well over there. And then I get an email one day. And this is where you come and tell the story. But the email, what was interesting about the email is I remember that first line because it's so immortalized in my brain.
And the first line that I wrote, because I'd been
Yeah.
stalking you for a while, so I see
Yeah.
these writings and I'm like, this guy's so interesting.
Yeah.
He doesn't think like most people do. He's got irreverent thoughts, and you were able to change my mind over a couple of things. And completely, I would disagree with you on some thoughts, but I thought like,
Yeah.
here's an individual I'd really like to hear about because it wasn't very common in South Africa. So
Yes.
I got on the, I've got to get in touch with him, and I said, dude, you're so gonna be my friend. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And this, as I remember, it's almost 20 years. Do you realize this? Yes?
Is it 20 years?
It's almost.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, because this is about 2007.
Okay.
Or thereabouts. Yeah, so this would be about 17, 18 years ago, right?
Okay.
So I'm just saying that I get this email, but what you never believed, and I don't know if you still believe it, you believe it now, that I already knew who you were.
Really?
When I got the email, I was like, Matsunyane, because remember, you were also writing at that time. You were writing a
News 24.
News
Women
24.
24.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. So I had read you. I remember reading this particular one where you were just describing the difficulty of being a black woman in a township. You were visiting your mother in Spreadview, just jogging.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's wolf whistles and whatever, but like you wrote it with such freedom, with such irreverence that I thought, okay. So when I got your email, I was like, this
Then we
might
started
work.
collaborating. Because at the time I was
yeah.
also doing Late Night with Kgomotso, which
Yes.
was on SABC2 on
Yes.
Saturday evenings. And you came to start helping me
Yeah.
write for that.
Yes.
And then Lerato Shabalala, in her eternal wisdom,
Yes.
got us to write a column on True Love magazine.
On True Love magazine.
He says, she says, where we would take the same subject matter from two very completely different sides of view.
Yes.
And then...
But you're skipping.
what am I skipping?
The reason Lerato Chabalala And I remember she gave us Melinda Ferguson, remember,
Right.
to be our
Yes, our editor.
direct line, our editor, right? Is that you and I then became friends in 2007. And then 2008, I have just had this book published. I am trying to immerse myself in the circles, in the media, and so on. And I must say, you took me along, because you knew a lot of people, because you already worked at Kaya FM. You were already in the media space. So you and I would sit in Melville until 1 in the morning, having what we thought were the most incredible conversations known to humankind.
But they were interesting.
No, but they were.
And then we said, like, imagine if we could have these conversations on radio.
Yes.
Right?
And remember that. Do you remember the central question that started all of it? Because we had a long running, almost feud about this. Well, it was just a long running debate, right? Remember the question?
Can men and women be friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's when the idea was born for us that maybe on radio, a smaller segment, maybe 1 hour, just doing a he said, she said. I come with my ideas, you come with yours, and we contrast them. So Lerato, by the time she came to us to say, what could you guys write about? We already had that foundation that we had been thinking about it for years, yeah.
And then we went on to host Good Morning Gauteng, which was right after Fat Joe. So thank you, Fat Joe.
Thank you, Fat Joe.
For getting fired by Greg Maloka, who called us and then fired us.
But do you even remember that you had actually contacted Greg, and you said to Greg, no man, let's do this. Can we have a meeting with you? We want to do like at night sometime, once a week, maybe on Thursday.
Yeah.
We do our little thing, the two of us. Whilst we're in this conversation is when then Fejo left Kai FM and unceremoniously. And then Greg is having this conversation with us. And then all of a sudden he looks at us and he goes, oh, hang on. Let's see what this happens. And then we went and did GMG.
Completely. And then subsequently went on to do Uncaptured.
Yeah, Uncaptured,
which was on Kaya FM also, which was the afternoon drive show.
Yes.
Which won an award, a Liberty Radio Award.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
I'll toast
water. When was that actually? Like 2019?
2019.
Oh, 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
Which made us a very interesting study case in media and radio.
Yes.
The reigning drive time show host.
The contract not renewed.
It's not renewed. This is what happened.
We've got a penchant for not getting invited back to parties. Let's not give any ideas to Spotify.
Yes.
Because this is a brand new show. We hope to be irreverent.
Yes.
We hope to be completely countercultural.
Yeah.
We hope to espouse alternative views.
You know, people like to use, we were using this word 2009 already, when we were doing GMG, about how our thinking is not binary.
Right.
Like we don't believe that there are two sides to any story.
Right.
There are multiple sides to any story. And one has this duty to really look at all the sides and make up your own mind about where you stand. But also it's not so important to make up your mind, because this show, we also have far more questions than we have answers.
And most importantly,
that's a conversation.
We are open to changing our minds.
Yes.
In South Africa, people believe in believing.
Yes.
I'm a Christian. I'm ANC. I'm EFF. And that if it's a sign of weakness, if you say, maybe I'm not so that anymore. Whereas we love that particular characteristic about people.
Yes.
Guys, you've got to be able to change your mind.
No,
you can't believe in the same thing from when you're born to when you were indoctrinated during apartheid times to when you're an adult. Until you die, you've got the same belief. No.
I think the other day, possibly just about 2-3 days ago, I think I put something up on Facebook and I said, there are certain ideas that I believed in so intensely in the past. I really believe them. I would have actually killed.
Right.
If someone had said, take up arms for this idea.
Which is a problem, to kill for your beliefs.
I know. I probably would have, because I believed in those ideas so so strongly that now I realize, BS,
Mm-hmm.
BS.
Things change.
Things change.
And the world is fluid.
I don't know what is there a name? Maybe it's self-felation for someone who quotes their own book. But I remember in my first collection of essays about life in South Africa, right? Some of my best friends are white, and I said, stupidity. I said, this is my definition of stupidity. Stupidity is is the reluctance to allow the ingress of new information to change your beliefs.
There we go.
That is stupid. I mean, if I come right now and I believe that this particular, liquid is water, and you are able to come up with better data that it's actually benzene.
Because I could be like Jesus. I could turn that into wine. And voila! It is not H2O anymore. It is something completely different.
Which is a very interesting, thought about why that particular miracle is your first one, right?
Because I love wine.
Yeah.
For my sins.
And,
yes.
and does it show?
It shows. Yes, it does.
Yeah,
anyway, we're going to have health discussions at some point.
Yes,
because the amount of weight that I've put on since COVID.
I love that you've also jumped right in there.
No, that wouldn't need
No, because since the last time. So if you used to watch and listen to Uncaptured, when we last did Uncaptured in 2020, I'm talking to you right now. There is about 8 to 10 kilogram that you have not been introduced to, and it's all here.
Is that all?
Yeah,
I can beat you. I can do better than that. Mlaleli, Kgomotso okay, it's 20 kilograms. No, it is nothing to celebrate. I feel terrible. I was just talking about it when we were getting ready for the show. Like one of the side effects of being chubby, the sweat.
Yes.
Drenching from you. I can feel it on my backside. Not marajo, like backside isn't like Ngcobo.
That other back.
Spine. When it just kind of like it drips down there. But we have a lot to discuss, and I can't wait until we get into it.
Yes, because health is a very, particularly at our age. Hey, yeah. I've already hit the big old 5'3".
Happy birthday and congratulations. Happy Easter, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all of them in one go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because 53 is an odd age, man.
Yeah. I'm right behind you.
I know. It's
April.
What, 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think almost to the day, 3 months.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we are going to be talking a lot about our health, but also maybe what we should do, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'll say it anyway. We need to have a challenge. Maybe not a challenge.
Ooh, I like a good competition because I'm so competitive and I hate to lose. Something of a weight loss challenge.
Something of a health challenge.
Health.
Maybe what we need to be measuring more than weight is centimeters.
Oh.
Especially for me around the gut, man.
What about the scale? Do we count the scale?
Okay, I suppose it counts.
Centimeters and the scale.
And the scale.
Where we can, because we want to feel better.
Yeah.
And then I'll tell you something. I'm so vain. I probably think this podcast is about me. Don't I?
I may not look like it. I may not dress like it. But honey, I am vain as hell.
Yeah.
So, never mind my health, but I just want to be able to look at myself and think, hello, Makanda.
I'm fantasizing of an 8-pack. But anyway, when we come back, let's get right into it. It's the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
There was a lot said about matric, and I've got some thoughts about it. Now, the matric results are out. Ooh, and South Africa was patting herself in the back. Yeah, Mzansi. Yeah, Ngcobo, which she should take credit for because it is her work. But we've had the best results. And I say best because the best results we've had in a couple of decades.
Yeah. What is the question you're asking me? And
Because there's a lot of thoughts. Matric. So we've had the
Yeah.
best results. Matric, for those who are listening outside of South Africa and may not know, is our
Yes.
final year of school.
Yes.
And it's supposed to be some kind of measurement as to how well
Mm.
schoolgoers are doing. So a couple of things. One, there's those who lament the number of students who have fallen through the cracks or have not graduated. So we
Yeah.
had 1.2 million. Initially,
Yes.
the class of 2024
Yes.
started off with the number of 1.2 million,
Yeah, in 2013.
2013. And then last year, 700,000 only made it through matric.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I do not know. Sometimes we South Africa, we're very good at fake surprise. Like we're amazed, right? So
Like your president, always
so,
surprised.
okay, so here's the question. Here's what I need to do, to see. You know how many years of compulsory education we have in this country, right?
Until grade 9,
Until
right?
grade 9, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Why?
I have no idea.
Right? Okay, so but in our infinite wisdom, we decided that grade 9 is the cutoff. Grade 10, from then onwards, you can elect to not do grade 10, right? Or the parent, right? So and of course, I mean, there's best practice in the world. It is true for many other countries where it's like metric. And if you actually think about it, the system that we used to have before our time, people from what was then called JC, which was
Junior certificate.
From there, you could go become a policeman or a nurse
Teacher.
or a teacher and so on. Metric actually was just for those people, and metric was 2 years, right? It was metric 1, metric 2, and so on.
Right. Standard 9 and standard 10.
It's standard 9 and standard 10. Well, I mean,
Well,
those time,
from 4 and
from
from 5.
from 4 and from 5, right, and so on. But the point there being that metric at some point was such an elite qualification that people used to go to university to do metric. Fort Hare University, for instance, in the 1950s, 1960s, I think, at some point, metric, you could only, if you from that area, you could do it at Fort Hare. So the point, coming back to today, the point is, we have decided in our infinite wisdom, and we'll get an expert to explain it, if we want to have this conversation further. In our infinite wisdom, we've said we only really need to get to grade 9. And so when we are now thinking of it as a tragedy that 500,000 didn't sit, because where else, so there's that, right? Some people elected to not do grade 10 purely because they were just not that way inclined.
Right.
No one is good at sitting down in a desk.
Right.
Not everyone's academic, right?
Some would have fallen pregnant. As we know, teenage pregnancy is a huge problem in this country.
Yeah.
Some would have fallen pregnant. Some would have been diverted into TVET schools.
Yeah,
more technical, vocational kind of like entries.
Yeah. Some went to work. Some went to work. So when we talk about this 500,000, I mean, it is not as much of a tragedy as people make it sound. We have designed the system to do exactly just that.
Right.
Probably out of necessity, because we could just see that not everyone was actually going to make it.
But I suppose
to metric,
we think that metric is a measurement of some, almost like a guarantee of some success for people.
Yes.
And therefore, that if you don't make it to metric, your chances of success are limited, which is not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Particularly for those going to TVET colleges, like artisanal students.
Yeah.
Students who are going to learn electricity, plumbing, who will make more money than you and I combined.
Yes.
Well, basically, because they're able to, those are essential services.
I mean, those are some of those professions and those trades where if you're a plumber and you're hungry, then you're probably not a very good plumber or what have you. There's always a plumbing job.
Right.
I had a plumber at my house this morning, just because I needed plumbing. We always all need plumbing, or going to fix cars, car mechanics and bricklaying, which is why right now in South Africa, if I say to you bricklaying, let's be honest now, what nationality is coming to mind if you if you drive past a building site, are you imagining a lot of South Africans there
No.
building? No.
I'm imagining a lot of Zimbabweans and Mozambicans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's and these are the things we need to talk about, right? And so when there's so much construction in this country, we're complaining about unemployment rates, but we are, looking down at like bricklaying and so on. But there are a lot of multi-millionaire bricklayers.
Right.
Quite a lot of them.
So I'm also worried because
Yeah.
I've got relatives, right?
Yeah.
And some of my relatives' children were writing matric.
Yeah.
But some of them are sort of like, I don't want to name people. So I'm trying to like make it as general as possible. There's one particular young man in my life
Yes.
who is writing matric this year.
Yes.
And I'm concerned about him because
Yeah.
he's lacking in ambition. He has no idea what he wants to do. And maybe that's unreasonable at 17, 18 years old that we expect children to know, next year, I'm going to study this and I'm going to study that. And he doesn't have the proclivity to make it to university, even though he's got the brains to.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we're fighting about his cell phone because he spends an inordinate amount of time on the PS and on his cell phone, essentially. So I'm worried. You and I, we had a pretty rigid idea of like, you're going to tertiary. You may not know exactly what you're going to do, but we knew that we were going to tertiary.
The plan was you're going to finish matric,
Yeah.
you're going to go to university or technical or some kind of college. You're going to finish whatever it is. You're going to get your qualification. You're going to write your CV. You're going to write a letter.
Right.
You're going to apply and present your CV, and you're going to get hired.
I'm worried
plan, yeah.
that today's matriculants, I don't know if they're facing more challenges than we did, because we had apartheid to contend with, but we didn't have this menace, le mene, but the social media.
Oh, God.
Which
Don't get me
I
started.
also have my addictions to it.
Yeah.
Game mom, it's me and TikTok. Hours later, I'm
Facebook.
like, what have I done? What's the problem?
Yeah,
Like, I haven't
yeah.
spent time writing my book,
Yeah.
doing whatever it is that I meant to, ignoring work because I'm procrastinating. But I'm saying, like, I'm worried that our kids are a little soft. Our kids are so soft that children raised in our households have likely never been in a combat taxi.
Can I fix that for you? Your worry is that we have raised soft children.
I'm a snowflake.
It is us. I mean, I think that, the whole thing about pointing and three fingers pointing at you.
Right.
Every single time I point at my kids and I'm like, I've got one who's starting matric as well.
Right.
And he's my last born, thank God. So, I look at him and I've thought about this many times. I've talked about it. I've even I've posted about it on Facebook. I'm like, I wonder what would happen if when I was 13, my mother, when I was 13, would put money in an envelope, be like, yeah, here's 600 back, go and pay all my accounts in town and give you money and you just got into a taxi and you went to town. My 17-year-old.
Right.
He when I say CBD, I'm not even talking about CBD in Joburg. CBD go Boxback. CBD Boxback would eat him up.
Right.
So he's not ready. It just points to how we have raised them.
And it's the chances of our children leaving our homes is significantly less. I left home when I was 16, going on 17. I turned 17 when I was in the US because I was a Rotary Youth Exchange scholar.
Yes.
Right. Today's kids, are we being too soft for them? Are we coddling our children? Because they seem to me less independent than we were forced to be. I remember at 13, 14, getting into a taxi, going to Carlton Center, going to Kind Center, going to watch a film, going to meet up with my friend Z and getting up to all sorts of nonsense, quite frankly, and catching the taxi back home.
But so you see the thing is you asking this question and you're asking almost like it's almost there's almost a question there. Are we coddling them? Of course we are. I mean, when my boys, we're all learning how to ride a bike, I would ride with them and be there. Or if I'm feeling too fat and unfit, I'd be those fathers driving in a car while they ride their bicycles. I used to leave my house when I was 6 years old. My mother would not know where I was on Saturday.
Right.
I would leave after breakfast and only come back around lunch. She would not know.
And come back
whatever.
umpunga.
Ngimpunga, isiZulu, ngimthuqasi, dust from it, because
Yes.
we were crawling through pipes and so on.
Right.
So we just have this thing. And for me, the question is more about, where did we get this type of parenting?
But also the world is different
How is it different?
in the sense that, for example, when you read about how many children go missing, you kind of wonder, it's like, do I really want to let my kids out there in the street?
Are there more children going missing, or are you hearing about children?
I think both. I do think that human trafficking is significantly more now than it might have been before.
Yeah.
Like when we were growing up, I don't remember children going missing. Do you?
I suppose then we grew up in very different, and people who grew
We
up.
were a bit more protected by all the adults in our
Yeah.
neighborhood. Yes, some of
Yeah.
them were silly. Some of them were
Yes.
molesters. We all know the problems. I'm not saying the
Yes,
world
yeah.
was better then, but I'm saying that there were less incidents of proper human trafficking because, every time somebody says never again, as in about slavery, I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
First of all, you raised a good question. Slavery never stopped.
It never stopped.
But there's a certain level of human trafficking that is going on now where you've got missing children, whether it's the pink ladies on Facebook or wherever, where you find out, and a lot of them are girls, but it's also just little boys.
Yes.
Where they're being taken for muti or God knows what, where children do go missing.
In my neighborhood, I'll say this, right? Mpumalanga Township, I grew up in One North and then I moved to Unit 2 and so on. There were certainly stories. Not as many stories as I'm hearing now, right? But there were certainly many stories of children being snatched in the 1970s, in the 1980s. Even back then, adults, I mean, if it wasn't a phenomenon, you would never have been told this thing. Don't talk to strangers. Don't be careful, blah, blah, blah. People, we used to scare children. Abantu bazokuntshontsha. Ntshontsha abantwana bazontshontsha. So all I'm saying is, but because my world was Mpumalanga Township in Hammersdale, I only heard about those cases happening. And I'm not disputing, because we'll need data, to resolve this, assuming we want to resolve it. But what I'm saying is, there is, when you fix anything, right, there is always the danger of overcorrection. And I think we've absolutely overcorrected. I think that we do not allow our children to explore as much as we did, which brings us back, because this is how we got to this conversation, which brings us back to this situation where we're sitting with children right now. It's January. Parents are the ones bothering to take them to stand in queues and so on, because you talked about proclivity, to even go to university. But even when they do want to go to university, they need you to hold their hand,
Right.
because we have got them used to it.
Right.
And so there's a conversation to be had about, I think we need to let go, because I think I'll tell you what my model of parenting was, which is how I think my wife and I have parented, and I always use it as a focal point. But that is, I wanted us to be the Huxtables.
Who didn't want to be the Huxtables?
We wanted to be the Huxtables because the Huxtables, we had parents that used to shout at us. They never shouted at their children. They talked to them. Everything was beautiful. And I think that we all were trying to, and I'm not just talking about the Huxtables per se, but there's something about the television we watched that made us want to parent children differently from how we were parented, which we know was problematic. But I think we've overcorrected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our children are less independent.
No, they're
and that
far
we're not
less
doing them any
independent.
favors.
And we're not helping
And I
them,
wonder,
yeah.
I don't know necessarily have the answer of like how we correct that. For
Yeah.
example, they sulk a lot when you take away the cell phone.
Yes.
Whereas good parenting should be that there's a certain number of hours that you should take away the cell phone, and possibly overnight. Because what I
Yes.
found with my nephew as well, he'll stay up all night talking to his friends and then won't be able to wake up in the morning. So it's a bit of a problem.
I'm not going to out you, my son, but you know yourself. Out of my 4 children, one of them is one of those. Like, he will sit up all night just being on the phone. And you wake up in the morning, you can see his eyes are red. He's
Right.
going to school, but this man hasn't really slept.
So-
But what do you do with a teenager who is above the age of 18? Because there's that as well.
Good question, because I was
Yeah.
also I wanted to ask you this. It's like, how do you correct that behavior, and how do you discipline kids? Because sometimes there are just children, hey, who are most likely to fuck up than not. I don't know how else to put it. Hey man,
that's
yeah.
that's the best.
Really.
That's the best way,
You know,
yeah.
there's just kids who
Yeah.
one fuck up after another.
Yeah.
How do you correct that kind of behavior? Because corporal punishment is not an option and shouldn't be.
It should never be. We should
It
never
really
go there,
shouldn't
right?
be. Even
Yeah.
if sometimes you want to shake them.
Yeah.
But how do we, as good parents, correct that behavior? I think respect is part of it, of that sort of like, I'm still your father. We are not friends.
Yeah.
I think we try to be too friendly with our children.
It's a problem, and you know, again, you know, I used to be very clear about the type of parent I was going to be, and for the most part, I became that parent, right? And also it comes from hankering and yankering. After a past of your own childhood, wishing my father you talked to me more, that he was around more, that I wish that instead of yelling at me, that he talked to
Ooh,
me
the shouting
more.
was terrible.
Because
I wasn't beat, I was shouted at.
Yeah, no,
And
same here, same here.
And it would make me cry. Like
Yeah.
the words used. Also, it's not like you were shouted at with love necessarily. I'm sure, listen, I know my parents loved me. Mara, the shouting would almost bring out the worst of your qualities. And you're talking about an adult.
Yes.
So an adult knows better.
Yeah.
Do you understand? And so they use your weaknesses against you in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
And that's really not cool, because it's a power dynamic. So when you use your power, it can be problematic when you're showing up the weaknesses of the child. But I ask that question again: how do you correct bad behavior from children, especially teenagers who are looking at you like this?
Yeah. Especially because also what's funny about us, we almost seem like to think that it's because the children are bad or no. And yet we're also the same people who will have a problem with a 57-year-old man sleeping with an 18, 19-year-old, which is legal, right? And our arguments that we advance are, but this person, do they really have their full agency? Because we understand that their frontal lobes are not fully developed and so on. And so back to this conversation, then the issue really is, how do you correct things with someone that you know is in flux? This person is not the same person that they were just 2 months ago. Sometimes the child that you saw yesterday is not the child that is today. He has moved on from that, you know. So, and the thing about it is, it brings me to this whole thing, because we started this conversation about schooling and metric results and so on, is when we are making these decisions with our children, because back then decisions were made for us, but when you make these decisions with your children, right? I think we should consider the fact that perhaps going to university or going to study should be something that should come a bit later, when children have had a bit of life experience. I've got a friend today, the day of the recording, who's actually sending his son, to Kampala, Uganda, to a friend to get some work experience and some life experience in a different country. Not everyone can afford to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Those friends, but
I always tell you, it's like my year in the United States at 16 was the best thing that could have happened to me, without a doubt. So we don't always have that option. But I would say another alternative is that mean what you say to kids. Empty threats are not going to help you. You know, when you're constantly raising the bar. Okay, if you don't do this, I'll do this. If you don't do this, I'll do this.
Because they'll call your bluff. They will call your bluff, by the way. Just to spite you, they'll say, okay, no, then I won't do it.
Because remember, teenagers particularly, it's a power play with your parents. You're also asserting your independence. And you want to show Uguti, nam yakula, basically, literally swinging it, basically for your parents to say, like, I want to see what you'll do. Yeah.
You know, I remember a fascinating conversations, and I remember this is when we were at Kai FM, and I think Dinika was our producer at the time. Remember Dinika?
I loved
Dinika Naidu.
Dinika.
Okay, she's now got a different
Oh,
surname.
she does.
Because I was having brunch with my daughter the one time in Parkhurst, and I actually ran into it. But anyway, so you and Dinika, this is when you get. I think this is 2017. Netflix was new. You guys were like talking about this. I remember you guys used to talk about Dirty John and you used to watch all of this.
Oh.
And to remember at the time, 2017, I just wasn't into Netflix.
Right.
And I think that the thing that actually got me into Netflix, I remember, was the Last Dance.
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan.
And the Bulls.
And that was my introduction to binge watching.
Right.
Because I think I watched that entire thing in one evening.
Right.
Like I just said, it was 3 a.m. And I couldn't.
You couldn't stop watching.
I couldn't tear myself away from it, right? So, binge watching. Like, fast forward now, we are what, when you put it like that, we are 8 years later.
Yep.
Right. So 8 years later, what are you watching?
Ooh.
What are you watching now? But also, what are your platforms, right? So there's Netflix, right?
Yes, there's Netflix, there's DSTV.
DSTV?
Those are the two that I watch.
That you watch.
I used to be subscribed
Prime?
to I think Amazon Prime used to, there was like a 3-month before you start paying, and then I did the 3 months, but I didn't. And there was a great series that I loved there with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, which has to do with hosts of a morning show. And I think it's called The Morning Show.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm embarrassed.
Yes.
Because, the last 5 years have been interesting. We'll get to talk about it more in these 18 episodes that we do for Spotify. But I went through a major depression.
Yes.
And so I binged a lot of stuff, and I got into a lot of stuff. So on DSTV, there's a lot of interesting Zulu language binging
like
that I've been doing. Ukungenwa.
Oh, I know what that is, but I do not know the show, but I know what that is.
Is the custom, in Zulu custom, where if a guy dies, his wife can be married by one of his other brothers.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
And this is a real life as it happens, where a brother does marry his brother's wife, and then he's got his own wife. So anyway, it's messy. It's trashy. It's interesting also on a cultural level.
Yes.
There is, I'd written some of these down. Let me see. Abu Love is Blind.
Oh, Love is Blind.
Yes. Love is Blind. I've watched Mexico. I've watched Germany. I've watched the US one. Absolutely fascinating. It's crazy. Love is not blind.
No, but
that's my conclusion.
And the type of Zulu man that I am. I love embarrassing myself and all my ancestors all the way to Shaka, right? Because I was also hooked on Love is Blind for a while.
Right.
But it was like several seasons ago.
But
and
you
I
know
think
what
the
it
original
is?
one,
It's like watching a train wreck.
Because
you know this is not gonna work. Like within 3 days, I love you. Will you marry me? It's just like, get out of here. What are you talking about? And then they go live together, and then they're on holiday, and then they meet the parents. So it's like knowing that 99% is going to fail that literally compels me to watch it. So the other thing that I've been, but it's only 2 episodes on Netflix the other day.
Yeah.
I was fascinated, and being somebody who's hosted shows, nothing like Jerry Springer, but I've hosted a late night show. You and I have hosted shows on radio. You've hosted talk shows. Do you understand?
Shows, yeah, that is
and the Jerry Springer thing, I think it's called Fights Camera Action. Taking on the lights, camera action. It was uncomfortable viewing.
It was very uncomfortable. Because we talked about this, and you told me about it, and you said, you must just go watch this. And I remember like the discomfort, because it also makes you yourself as a practitioner, in the media space, questions, very fundamental questions about what your responsibilities are as a host, as a producer. How far is too far?
Right.
You've just talked about Love is Blind, right? And obviously, even there's some level of manipulation of contestants.
Sure.
Every reality show has it. But of course there are lines. But Jerry Springer, what were your takeouts?
He died a rich man. 60 million US dollars. That's what he was worth when he died. He beat the ratings. The reason they continued to do this and they put so much pressure on the producers to make people behave so badly is because of that. We have a channel right now that is capitalizing on Black poverty, on Black depravity, and it's doing exceptionally well. Moja Love. Like, you know how CakeNet was founded on Boere love. Boere love for Boere love, basically. Moja Love is the opposite. It's like a literal hatred of Black people. It is cheap and it is nasty. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're showing the worst of Black behavior. There's a couple of exceptions, like Ex Repo, where there's a sense of justice because people are getting their things back. But for the most part, you have presenters who have no business like dealing with a family's squabbles. Not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, not a therapist, not a priest, just sort of like, oh, Ndumiso, like, you're having sex with your brother's wife. And Moja Love basically, I realized, took its example from Jerry Springer.
So I am going to play devil advocate. I am the top dog at Moja Love. I am looking, but the same thing could have been said, by the way, about the just recently folded the Daily Sun, right?
Right.
And
it was said.
Exactly, right? So, and which is why they made such great bedfellows. A lot of adverts went that way. But my point here being, so I am now, representing the channel Moja Love, and I say to you, but people want to watch it. So if people believed what you did, so what does it matter what Kgomotso Matsunyane thinks of this when there are, 30 million South Africans just who cannot wait for their next episode of I Blew It? Is I Blew It on it or is not? Okay, cool.
I can't remember.
My relationship
Right.
with DSTV ended a while ago. So but whichever one, right? So there are people who they are hooked on it. They want to watch this, and the thing about it is they want to talk about it.
And
everyone's
some of it is
timeline,
really compelling.
It's compelling.
I will
right?
admit to that. Some of it is really compelling.
So what's the problem?
Again, I revert back to my example of CakeNet.
Yes.
CakeNet now has 3 channels.
Yes.
Do you know how many Afrikaners there are in this country? A handful.
Yes.
Comparatively speaking, to the millions and millions of Black audiences that are out there.
Yes.
So your motivation really has to be different. Like, it's always very interesting when TV awards come up and a program on CakeNet, which was probably 16,000 rands per minute, is pit with a telenovela on one of the Black channels, which is significantly less per minute. Do you understand the difference? The investment in Afrikaner culture and, like I say, the love of self that Afrikaners have is something that we should take as good and as an example. So you can, and you can, it's low-hanging fruit. You can pander to the worst of us, or you can also take responsibility and say, while, and I'm not saying all the 100% of the stuff is going to be absolutely fantastic and fulfilling of a national service and all of that, but surely part of your responsibility should be the upliftment of Black people. It shouldn't, money cannot be your only motivator.
There's something fundamentally that makes us want to enjoy. Like with Jerry Springer.
So we enjoy watching each other fail.
We enjoy watching
or
these car
be
crashes.
praised, right?
Like people enjoy I Blew It.
Right.
And they love to laugh at people. But also it just goes back to Jerry Springer, where Jerry Springer has got this thing where you just roast a stranger. Because that's a metaphor for what happens when people are just watching these things. I mean, the comments, you go through the comments as people are posting these things, and you realize that there's some kind of hatred.
So can I give you an answer?
What?
Absolutely not. I
Yes.
cannot believe
Yes.
that Black people have a gene
Yes.
that makes us behave like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
But you know what? We're not going to finish that conversation today. But we've got 17 more episodes to go. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us. We'll be back soon.